anytime you go through a major change, especially with tech, everyone becomes a salesperson, right? To some degree, we have to sell you on the good of what's coming. But I think when people have an understanding of, okay, yes, I have to do something different now, where it's going to be a different process, it also gives the company an opportunity to help that individual learn a skill that they may want to learn, right? Because they were stuck in the manual process, because they were stuck in the same old, right? Deep down, they probably want to learn something new. I think society just in general, we're always trying to crave and learn something new and a new skill. This is where the company has to lead with that. And then, oh, by the way, the change is coming to where you get to do that. We get it backwards, right? Like we get it backwards.
Welcome to the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. Healthcare is broken, and we aim to fix it one conversation at a time.
Yeah, we've probably been rolling. We're just hanging out and chatting on the couch. But Chaz Fields, why don't we kick off a podcast? How
awesome. Let's do it. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, man. This is great.
It was nice to meet you. We got to chit chat a little bit beforehand. I hit it off really quick. I think we're already talking about hunting and beers now, possibly. So I think we became fast friends, man. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is you're a fellow podcaster, man. So tell me about your podcast.
I am. So it's our podcast. So when I say our, Julie Devlin is our co-host, and it's brought to you by the Workforce Institute at UKG. And not to sound too commercial-like, but UKG, Ultimate Kronos Group. And, you know, Julie and I, when we presented the opportunity, we wanted to meet HR, payroll, benefits, you know, all of these individuals who are in practitioner roles with things that are going on in their life, the challenges, opportunities, like how do we meet these people where they're at and discuss it? So I get to do a lot of cool things in my job, and consulting is one of them. And Julie and I take stories from people we hear at shows or conferences where we're speaking and bring it to them and say, hey, look, like, what do you want to hear about? Well, what are you seeing here? What are you doing here? And we spend about 20 minutes talking about it, you know, try and give some quick hit advice, and then, we move on. So it's been a really, really cool experience.
How long has that podcast been going on?
So we launched it in June of last year. So coming up actually on a year. And then, so I don't even know how many episodes we have. We're around 2025, and, we drop a bi-weekly cadence, and we really, really enjoy it.
I love it too, man. I got the podcast bug about a year ago myself, which I share quite a bit on this show.
Yeah.
But so tell me a little bit about how do you guys go about the production of it? Like, who's your audience? Like, who are you speaking to most?
Yeah. So production is pretty simple, right? We use a couple of online platforms that we do. Julie and I sit down and with a couple of other members of the team, and they say, hey, look, we want to hear this. Obviously, we ask our audience, what do you want to hear about? And we sit down and we map out the outline from, what we've seen in better practices, what we have developed as a team as better practices. Our audience is anyone who works, right? So we try and address the frontline employee to the manager, to the VPs, to the execs. You catch an episode, like we just did an episode not too long ago about pay equity, right?
Okay.
So they reached out to us and said, hey, can you do an episode on pay equity? And we're like, absolutely. Let's figure out the best way we can approach this for companies who really want to drive change in their organization.
And you guys, I don't think we've mentioned the name yet, People Purpose Podcast,
yes,
correct?
The People Purpose Podcast.
Yeah. I love it. PPP. We were joking earlier, whether the PPP, like the loans or whatever, but People Purpose Podcast, which obviously, we're going to discuss the subject of human resource management, human capital management, which I'm really interested to dig into with you. But I mean, that seems to be like at least the overall kind of focus for you. That's where you mentioned, like you've in a really big organization, so you kind of got a built-in audience of people that are interested in hearing about that subject. Who else do you find is like latching on to that subject matter? Because I'm curious how you found kind of your outside audience over time as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So when we were putting this podcast together, so just backtrack a little bit. With my job, we do a lot of thought leadership. We do a lot of writing and speaking at conferences. So like SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management conferences, APA, which is American Payroll Association, benefits conferences, things like that. And then what we do is we listen. So we have about 50,000 customers, give or take. And we also have a consulting element of our job where people will reach out and say, hey, we want some better practices. We want to engage employees. We want to build productivity or become more efficient, more effective with our people. And we hear what they say, right?
Yeah,
so having access to that many people, plus what you have at conferences coming up to you afterwards saying, hey, you talked about this subject. Can we set up a time to talk to you? Absolutely, right? So our audience is really everyone, but specifically those who are trying to focus in on HR, what would be generalized as HR or payroll or operations problems that how can we be more efficient? How can we be more effective? How do we lower our turnover rates? Stuff like that, which is, all of it is associated with costs. And that's what we want to do is we want to focus on our people. So we drive those numbers up, ultimately impacting the bottom line.
Well, that's what I like about it. And I know we're going to get into the kind of the relationship between HR and benefits today to a degree. That won't be the sole purpose of that, but just the focus on the people, right? Often, at least in my industry, what gets lost with brokers and vendors and carriers and everybody's solutions is what they can sell and what fixes everything. And it's this magic glittery pill and all these things. But it's like, what about the people consuming it? What's the impact on the human being, the person itself? That's what I really want to spend some time on. And I appreciate you kind of pulling us back because I do want to take one more step back and say, who is Chaz Fields? I want to, as much as you want to share, but kind of your backstory. How'd you get here? Where'd you grow up? All those things. What led you to where you're, sitting today?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I spent the vast majority of my life in a small town in Indiana. I went to a small private school, which you and I talked about. In fact, they played each other in some sports. Yeah, so a small private school in Indiana. And, it was right at the time I was graduating where we were told, we talked about this, where we were told, hey, if you get a college degree, getting a job would be really, really easy, and that's after 2009 market crash. Then it was, well, you need 3 years of experience plus a college degree. And then it's like, okay, how do I get an entry-level job with 3 years of experience, right? And
kind of like it's a misnomer if it's an entry-level job. Right? This is where I enter the market.
So really, it's a 3-year experience job is what it is. Like change your job description, right? So so I did that and I started volunteer coaching baseball pitching at my high school. And a really crazy story, a guy by the name of Ken Arundale reached out to me, who's no longer with us. Ken's no longer with us. And he said, hey, you're coaching my son. You wouldn't happen to be, and he mentioned my dad's name, you wouldn't happen to be his son. And I said, I am. So of course I, text my dad, I call him and I'm like, hey, you know Ken. And he was like, oh yeah, Ken used to play ball for me years ago. Okay. So Ken's son now played for me and Ken was operating a construction company, fiber optics construction company. And he was like, hey, you've got a business degree, right? And I said, I do. And he goes, okay, can you read construction prints? And I said, I can, and he was like, come work for me. Okay. I get a job from Ken and a lot of transition has happened since then. Go back to work for Ken, which took my family and I back to Indiana for a short time. And then, I finished my master's degree working for Ken in HR and then got into the HCM tech space, shortly thereafter. Moved back to Texas, and then here I am.
Well, how did you venture down the path of HR? Did you know early on you wanted to study that?
So it's really interesting you asked that. I was thinking about when you sent me the questions. I had a lot of
don't reveal my secrets of the questions before I get it. No, I'm totally kidding. No, everybody knows that. Like I try to be prepared.
And thank you for that. So I had a lot of good mentors. In fact, my thesis was in recruiting and training and mentorship in the workplace and how important it is. So I practiced what I preached. I found people that had a strong business acumen or were really successful or really dear friends. And they helped shape kind of my journey, right? It's those people you rely upon. And I wanted something that was going to keep me guessing. Right. And keep me challenged, typical millennial. We're always on to the next thing, trying to figure out how we can keep improving our lives. And I knew that getting into HR, specifically in the tech space, that it was going to be challenging, right? Tech is always evolving. HR is always evolving. There's always challenges to be met. And here I am. So
that's awesome. Yeah. And here you are. And how many years are you into your career now?
I have 10-ish? Yeah, something like that. I've been with UKG for 5 years and then we kind of backtracked from there. So it's about 10 years.
Awesome, man.
Give or take.
Yeah. It's good. I mean, it sounds like obviously things are going well for you, man. I do want to spend the bulk of our time on UKG and the human capital management space. But the last thing I want to ask you about that's a precursor to that is your volunteer work, because it looks like you spend quite a bit of time volunteering. Tell me about the motivations there and your experience in volunteering.
Yeah, so it's really cool. I think we're on this earth to make it a better place. Period. End of story. And to give back to people who are less fortunate, more fortunate. It doesn't matter. We have this mantra in our house that we're going to be servant leaders, right?
Cool.
We're going to be servant leaders in everything that we do, and that's really important to both my wife and I. And we're now teaching our kids that. I know we talked about that, right? So it goes beyond just us, and I think we live in a society where it's very, very self-serving, and I would much rather teach my kid to serve others and find gratification in that.
Yeah.
And then, we're doing Habitat for Humanity in college was amazing. You get to see people's faces light up for a home that they thought they would never have, right? I did a short stint with Big Brothers Big Sisters, where you just build a relationship with people and a young person where they have a lot of questions, right?
Yeah.
They have a lot of questions, and you want to do your best to lead them through life in a way that, again, is a life of servitude, but more importantly, that's going to help them grow in a way that makes a big impact for others. So
that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
Wow. Kudos for you for doing that.
Appreciate that.
Thank you for sharing that story, because you're right. It's like, what do you do to leave the net result of your experience on this planet a positive experience? And whether that's small, whether it's on a macro scale, doesn't really matter. Can you look back over the course of your life and go, hey, I believe I left this world a little bit better place than it was before I started?
And it's super empowering to be able to go to bed and know that you have a clear conscience and you did good that day, right?
Yeah.
Like, not every day is that way, but it's really cool to know that, hey, we did some good today, and let's see if we can do it again tomorrow.
Well, I like that you mentioned, like, it doesn't really matter the person's circumstance that you're helping, right? I've never looked at a person's circumstance and evaluated whether or not to help if I thought I could, right? And I think that's important to understand, right? Whether it's a young person helping them grow in their career, or maybe it's an established person that needs a contact. Like, there's never any motivation to go, well, what am I getting out of this equation if I help you or something to that degree? And I think taking that approach, your attitude towards servant leadership, just being open to help with no expectation of return on that help, period. Stop there, and whatever happens as a result of that, it's not your motivation to do it in the first place.
The idea of self-servitude, if you can challenge yourself to do exactly what you just said, you would be shocked at how many larger opportunities come your way that actually serve your family or serve yourself, right? And it's that mindset.
Come out of nowhere.
Like, hey, you and I, this situation we're in, it was like, hey, I saw you. Hey, I saw you. Let's get together and have a conversation, and it came out of nowhere.
That's
right?
fun. So, one of the most fun, I was going to say funnest, which is clearly grammatically incorrect. One of the most fun parts of this job, I think, is the opportunity to network. You probably experienced this with the podcast too, is like, you have an opportunity to invite somebody on your platform, and hey, you get to be the superstar for the next 45 minutes. But it's fun because people, one, want to do this, and two, I genuinely enjoy meeting new people and getting to hear their story. Like, that's one of my favorite parts about my job, is just doing that very thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you had that same experience.
Yeah, you can't. I don't think you can do this job or the job that I do or the job that you do without genuinely enjoying networking and meeting new people, right? And for some people that's okay, right? Some people have social anxiety and they don't want to do that. Great, let's find a path that can help you thrive. But for people like you and I love people. I genuinely enjoy getting to know their story and what they're doing, and as long as they're willing to share, and that. It's a lot of fun.
And just being able to foster a conversation between two human beings that's interesting, that's honest, that's like
it's
not
transparent,
just like, it's transparent.
Yeah.
that's like that. How cool is that to get to be one to facilitate that?
Yeah.
So, all right. So we've dug into who you are. By the way, the pink socks, I'm digging those. Those are off
matching
camera.
the blue. Yeah.
So, all right. So let's talk a little UKG, Ultimate Kronos Group. I know there was a merger here not too long ago. Tell me the backstory of UKG.
This podcast is brought to you by True Captive Insurance, a premier medical stop-loss captive for employer groups ranging from 25 to 1,000 employees. True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. That's why they take a white glove approach, making it easy for employer groups to transition into a program built specifically for them. Check them out at truecaptive.com. This podcast is sponsored by PlanSight. PlanSight is a technology for employee benefits brokers to more efficiently manage their RFP process for any group size, all funding types, and over 20 benefit lines and point solutions. PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP technology on the market today. Let's modernize your RFP process together. Check us out at plansight.com.
Yeah. So prior to the merger, we had Ultimate Software and Kronos, right? So two best in breed companies, great places to work. Hit all of the top tier awards that you see of places that you want to work, Glassdoor, Forbes, all these things. And right as the pandemic happened, we announced the merger. So Kronos was known as a global leader in workforce management or timekeeping software, and Ultimate was known as a leading HR and payroll solution, right? So it just made sense, right? It just made sense. So when the merger happened, our CEO, Aaron Ain, who's an amazing man, I was just with him a couple of days ago. He wrote this book called Work Inspired, and it has been an inspired merger from day one. Cool. And it's been really, really special to watch two top tier cultures come together. And let's be real, mergers are not always easy, but we're setting the bar and bringing that together and making it easy.
Well, talk to me about then, because I know obviously the timing in that was really brutal. So talk to me about.
By the way, we're going to go remote. You know what
everybody's remote now, and you're never going to meet half the people we work with. But so talk to me though about how were you guys able to not one just successfully navigate the merger of two giant corporations together? It's not like you can just fold a book and like it slams shut. But then also with the added challenge of that remote nature of the pandemic. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I had worked remote before, and there's a lot of challenges that come with that because we have offices all over the globe. But to flip a switch and say, hey, you're working remote from now on, there's obviously a lot of logistical things that go through it. But our tagline is our purpose is people, right? And we believe that. And when I say we believe that, not only do we believe it, but every executive leader enforces it, for lack of a better term. They exemplify it through their behavior. They exemplify it through everything that they do from a meeting. And it's our culture to expect that, right? Okay. Let me meet you where you're at. Let's have a conversation. We've got some amazing tools that keep helping with that. But what I will say is they do a really, really good job of navigating. One of the things that we instituted or that the company instituted was a weekly video at the start with Aaron saying, here's where we're at, here's what we're doing, here's where we're moving forward, right? So it's almost like you have a personal connection with your CEO and he's, hey, look, this is going to be hard, right? He's very transparent. It's going to be hard. By the way, there's COVID too, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have all of these different elements. And I think you see a lot of in the media, in the public eye, where it's, mergers are hard, and you see all of the negative things that come with it. And we just address it up front. We're like, hey, there are going to be some hard things that we're going to do, but know that we care about you, and we're going to do everything we can to keep you working and keep you healthy and make sure that your family's safe. And we look at it as anytime a new person has joined the company, it's not a new employee. It's someone that we get to take care of. That's cool. Right. And I mean, if that doesn't speak enough volumes going through a merger in the middle of a pandemic, I don't know what does. Right?
Well, that's amazing. I love the fact, just to touch on the fact that you said your CEO is like doing weekly videos and stuff like that, and you feel like you know him a little bit. Yeah. A couple things there. The embracing of kind of new media, right? Just really the quick turnaround. Yeah. Probably wasn't a huge amount of fuss and production value, but it's just like somebody talking to you.
Yeah,
right? Like,
5 minutes. Yeah. Here's what's going on. You know what I mean?
And then like that's what you look at a podcast, right? Probably you have the same experience where somebody's listened to your podcast before and you meet them for the first time. They're like, they already feel like they know you a bit. Yeah. They ask you about something. Yeah. Look at the scale of like a Rogan as well. I mean, like you literally feel like you're hanging out with Joe Rogan and his buddies half the time. But he's a great podcaster as well. But I think that's cool that your CEO sort of got the opportunity to be personal with the employees going through something challenging. And he wasn't just this figurehead out in the public.
Yeah, and when you meet him, he's not, right? Yeah. Like, how's your family? It's so funny. The story that we tell, that he'll often tell is he'll go in and he can always tell. We work for a tech company, right? So dress code is pretty broad, and it's so funny when he goes. He can always tell who's there for an interview at our corporate office, which is a very tech space, right? Like the coffee bar and all the fun things that you get to do, pool table stuff like that. And he'll go up to the people in a business suit or who are dressed to the nines, and he'll be like, hey, how you doing?
Good luck on your interview. Right?
Yeah. Like, good luck on your interview. Yeah. and then they'll go up and do the interview, and they're like, man, I just met this guy, and the recruiter, whoever the interviewer, he's like, wait, oh, so you met our CEO? And they're shocked.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And it's like, wait, he talked to me. And it's like, yeah. And that's, I think therein lies the rub in the way that business and society functions, is he's breaking the chains with that. He's just like, hey, I'm going to meet you where you're at. And my second favorite thing is he'll go, hey, how you doing? And you'll give him, oh, I'm great. And then he'll look at you and say, no, really, how are you doing?
That's cool.
You know what I mean? So there's a true humility, but also true genuine element that carries through him, that also carries through the organization. And we really do believe our purpose is people.
Well, I love, so just to kind of counter, not a counterpoint, but maybe some context for us. We're a much smaller organization than yours. But same flat sort of hierarchy with, like, our CEO and our COO, co-founders, good friends with them. I mean, we speak multiple times a day. They're on every call, regardless of who the employee is. They're on almost every call. That's like an internal meeting, a game planning session, and it's like there is no status or air of importance about and tech company too. So even though I dress like this for the podcast, and I'm used to meeting brokers, they're often dressed up more often. A T-shirt that says Plan Site on it and some jeans is pretty common. Apparel, in the office as well. It's just kind of you dress for the day or dress for the moment. Yeah. But that was something that I had to get used to. Is like, oh no, go dress down a little bit. We're a tech company. We're cool. I carry a backpack and stuff, like a nice bag. But we
have both.
We have both. Yeah, I pull out the one that I need depending on the circumstance. Right. But so, I want to hear about HCM, human capital management. I mean, admittedly, I know the term, but I really don't know what that means. So, could we even go to the step of defining what that means?
Yeah. So, human capital management, kind of the pre-2020 way of looking at it, is the employee life cycle. Okay. So, recruiting, hiring, onboarding, HR function, payroll, performance, very segmented, if you will, and in the process that goes along with that, right? We approach it a little bit differently. Yes, we have solutions that meet all of those needs, but we really try and go beyond that, right? Okay. We focus in on, let's figure out a way to provide modern technology that, I know this sounds like a commercial, but it's building autonomy, it's building flexibility, right? And with that, it's how can I get something in front of an employee, number one, that they're going to use, more importantly, number two, that it's going to impact their life in a positive way. And if I can do that, I know it's going to positively impact the business. Yeah. So for us, when we think about, flexibility and autonomy, think about like a shift swap, right? So if you go into a manufacturing facility, services and distribution facility, I've talked with hundreds and hundreds of people that have text chains or private Facebook groups where, Spencer has a sick kid at home and I need someone, like he needs me to come fill his shift, instead of making hundreds and hundreds of calls or texts or whatever it is, I'm going to pull out an app on my phone. I'm going to drop my shift. And then what happens is we use AI to then say, okay, you know what? Chaz has the same skill set that Spencer does. And you know what? Chaz wants some extra hours. Chaz can look at his phone and say, oh, Spencer dropped a shift. Let me pick it up.
That's cool.
And it's done.
That's really cool.
And it's done. Doesn't need manager approval, doesn't need anything. So something as simple as requesting time off, right? Like we all have to request time off. And what's really cool about that is we've approved over 25 million paid time off requests through AI without anybody touching a button.
Amazing.
So with our scheduling and our AI and automation tool, like this is how we meet the modern workforce. Like our generation doesn't want to go into the workplace and take a step back in technology, right? Like we don't. We don't, we'll always buy the new phone. We always buy the new watch, whatever it is. So that's how we look at HCM. It's not the segmented, although we do have the solutions that appease that, but we really try and focus in on how can we meet people where they're at with modern tech.
Well, now I'm curious too, because, HCM, is a lot of the, I used to go to this benefits conference and the guy would say, hey, here's my finance hat. Now let me put on my HR hat for a minute, because obviously the way that you make decisions or some of the products you engage with or solutions, there's a different lens you have to look through for HR versus finance.
That's right.
So talk to me about some maybe the quantifiable metrics with investing in human capital management, that the company actually can save money, make more money, be more productive, more efficient, whatever.
Sure. So let's look at them from the different lenses, right? So let's look at it from an operations lens. If I know that my productivity is down, it could be that an employee is tired or burnt out, right? And that could be anybody. If I'm in the benefits world, how many people still do manual processes to simply send a file over to their carrier, and then all of a sudden we get the insurance cards back, and then there's that delay, and then the employee saying, wait, am I covered, right? From a solutions perspective, obviously all of that comes with cost associated with it. How about turnover, right? So on average, companies spend 3 to 6 months of a person's salary, right, to recruit and train someone to get into a position. Okay. What that number doesn't include is how much downtime, whatever the line worker, whatever job that's doing, that doesn't include the money being lost from that being productive. So if I make $60,000 a year, a company's spending $30,000 to $45,000 just to get someone in that job.
I see. Yeah.
Modern tech, if I can simply ping you and say, hey, look, there's this open job. Companies are using it all the time now, where if we're recruiting people, we've got to make it simple. We've got to make it effective. And every step of the way, there's always ways that we can increase efficiency, productivity, effectiveness, engagement, all of these different things that impact the bottom line. That's what drives results. And as long as I can reinvest in my people, I know those results for the company are continue to go up.
Yes, to say it, right? See, there's a commitment that if the people are happier, that the quality of life for your individual employees is better, they're going to be better employees, right? You don't necessarily have to make a decision for that,
right?
But that's an obvious assumption that that's going to be the case. If happier people make better employees at the same time, right?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. You'd be shocked at how many companies I talk to on a regular basis, big companies that still do things on paper.
Yeah.
Right. So if they're still doing things on paper, tasks that can be automated, companies, I know strategy is a big word. Everybody wants to be strategic, and they can't get away from the paper process. Well, if you want to be strategic, we've got to get away from the time suckers and make that easier. And that's where, that flexible, autonomous, and that autonomy drives through our tech to really give you the opportunity to be a better manager, be a better employee, take away the time suckers, and help you enjoy your job more.
Yeah.
Because I know, going back to the number we just talked about, if you enjoy your job more, good chance you're probably not going to leave.
You're going to stay. Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah. No, that's a shit. And you talk about a time sucker, old practices, man. I don't know how much, kind of experience you have in the benefits world or the procurement process for an RFP. And I won't go into commercial or what I do other than to say that, some documents, proposals still get transmitted via Word document nowadays. Almost everybody.
How dangerous is that?
How dangerous is that? PDF is the primary example. There's still got to be a transcription of a PDF to Excel, or some people use OCR, but it's like, how much time is being spent just solely taking numbers and fields here and plugging numbers and fields here, and you have a human being that intervenes in that process, right? My industry is notorious for being slow to adapt to technology. You'd just be surprised how like people still latch on to a process that's outdated, is inefficient, but they know it well, and they just kind of get stuck in that way, right? So like you guys as a tech company probably understand just the behavioral element of trying to change somebody and get them to adapt a new process.
Yeah.
That there's a little bit of a commitment to the vision to come through the training, and the other side, the quality of life improves.
Yeah, you've got to have, so I'm a change management practitioner, and I speak a lot on change. I'm actually a change nerd, and I spent some time out.
I need to pick your brain on that.
Yeah, well,
I feel like that's what I do every day is change.
Yeah. So we absolutely can set up another time for you and I just to chat, but it's, people know what they know, right? And if we don't have a good vision, the word that you used, or a good understanding, that we provide them, good communication, and hey, this is how your job is going to get better, right? Like anytime you go through a major change, especially with tech, everyone becomes a salesperson, right? To some degree, we have to sell you on the good of what's coming. But I think when people have an understanding of, okay, yes, I have to do something different now, where it's going to be a different process, it also gives the company an opportunity to help that individual learn a skill that they may want to learn, right? Because they were stuck in the manual process, because they were stuck in the same old, right? Deep down, they probably want to learn something new. I think society just in general, we're always trying to crave and learn something new and a new skill. This is where the company has to lead with that. And then, oh, by the way, the change is coming to where you get to do that. We get it backwards, right? Like we get it backwards.
So. No, I agree. And I had a personal experience recently with, I'm a big kind of fitness guy. I like to lift weights, but I started following this guy called Knees Over Toes guy on Instagram. He's really smart, but he's kind of dispelling the notion, just to not to go too far, but like, hey, don't ever have your knee creep over the front of your toe. That got hammered out of us in sports. Don't ever let that knee come over the toe.
That's how you hurt it back.
And, that's how you hurt it back, right? Well, he's kind of dispelling that notion as a guy that's had a bunch of knee injuries. Mm-hmm. He started working through that range of motion, and so now he's built a little business on it. And the reason I bring that up is I actually took a step back in some of the lifts and squatting and the heaviness, and just going, all right, let's work on the periphery. Let's work on the deficiencies, take a step back. But I knew to bring it home is like the other side of this should be an improved outcome, even though 6-8 weeks maybe of just scaling things back to get better on the other side. So a commitment to the vision of what is to come. I was managing my own behavioral change and reducing the weight, kind of going through a lot more prehab style stuff, but knowing because I wanted something as an outcome on the other side of it, I was ready to commit to that change.
Yeah, I like to use that analogy, kind of call it the mirror approach, right? Okay. Every time you look in the mirror, you can reflect on what you're doing, but more importantly, like, you can also look back and see how much progress that you've made. And the big key component of that is what's on the other side of the mirror. Right. And we don't ask ourselves that question enough, or what's on the other side of the mirror, where what can I get to? So when I look back, I can see even more progress. Right. And that could be from lifting weights. That could be from lifting weights. That could be from leading a change management discussion, with a large organization that's implementing, a new benefit solution, or going through an RFP or whatever it is. Right. So there's a really big, there's a really large opportunity for us to just simply reflect, but also challenge ourselves to grow and kind of let go of that change. But a lot of that is defined in company culture and how that change is going to impact that individual. And we just get it backwards.
Yeah, I would agree with you, man. And the company culture is a big thing. I mean, we're still kind of defining our culture as an organization since we're new, but I've been around other organizations that just had an incredible culture. Like the culture almost precedes whatever they do as a business, right? You just people enjoy working there. Or they've got a style or an aesthetic or just a type of person that gravitates towards working there. And that cultural element is so important. Yeah. Where I think some businesses succeed almost because solely their culture is better than one of their competitors.
Yeah, it's very true. And the reality of it is, when you're developing a culture, obviously that usually falls on a human resources person to help develop that and help improve that, or the VP of People Ops or whatever it is. The big thing that we try and make realistic is you don't know unless you ask. Right. And I have yet in any room, if I ask someone, they're not willing to give their opinion, even if I have to ask it twice. Right. Where it's like, I don't want to give that, know. Okay, but really, tell me what's going on, because I can't make this better if you don't share with me what's going on, right? All of that's rooted in trust. And if your company culture doesn't have a trust and a foundation of trust with the employees or their experience or where the business is going, probably not going to be able to manage that well, and more importantly, make an impact for everyone else around them. The companies that are good, though, you're like, man, what are they doing?
Yeah, what are they doing?
What are they doing? And I'll tell you, they're asking, but then they do something about it. Right? Like it's not a novel concept here. Like, we're still humans, and there's still human interaction, and there has to be human interaction, whether it's through tech or like this, and that's where I think a lot of companies miss it, is they just think, well, we'll keep going and we'll fix it when it's broken, when in fact it's probably already broken. And guess what?
You just ignoring the problem. I had a buddy that always jokes like, I just ignore a problem until it becomes too big to ignore anymore, and then it's too late, right? Like that's his MO. I'm like, hey, that's probably not the way to approach things, but that's what you're kind of describing.
It's like my golf game.
It's a golf game. You just ignore it until it's like really bad. But companies do that as well. Like, they don't know where their blind spots are, and they're not, maybe people, like you said, aren't willing to be honest. Maybe they're afraid to be completely candid about what the problem is. I'm sure you see that quite a bit as well, right?
Well, again, I do. It boils down to trust, right? it boils down to trust and how you're interacting. I firmly believe that trust is a lot of joint ownership too. We often talk about being good organizational citizens, right? If it's broke, then you need to make suggestions to fix it, right? I ran into an issue a couple of weeks ago with a company I was working with, and they had someone that had a lot of knowledge that left. And I said, can you help me understand that? And there was a major disconnect in what they were telling me versus what the peers of that individual who left was telling me.
Okay.
Right. So there's this large disconnect where it's, hold on, if that employee left, well, did they share with you what was going on? Well, yeah, but we ignored it. Okay, hello, and thank you, mic drop. I'm going to leave. Okay, quit doing that. What do I say? Quit doing that. So there's a lot of cool things out there that are offered in our solution. We actually have this thing called Employee Voice, where it's an anonymous survey that you can use and ask the questions, right? And employees can, provide response. And then our AI behind it looks at negative and positive words and says, okay, this employee's happy. Hey, here's a suggestion they're making. By the way, 5 other employees have used this same word. Let's go talk to that manager and figure out an action plan to drive the organization, right? So it's something as simple as that, just asking employees. Well, some employees may not want to have a one-on-one conversation, but they're willing to do it on their phone or behind their desk. Others desire that one-on-one conversation. Yeah. So then the question is, hey, how do you want to do your one-on-ones? Great. I've got a great tool at the Workforce Institute, how to improve one-on-ones if those people are like you and I, where we want the feedback directly. So there's just a lot that goes into this personal and human relationship that drives the business. And I think we've forgotten a lot of it.
Well, I'd agree, man. And that brings me to the next question, which you'll bring it home to the benefits conversation to a degree. One things I was mentioning to you is that people sometimes forget the impact to a human being when a decision is made around a benefit, whether it's a fringe benefit or an actual insurance line product. So I want to hear kind of the voice of the HR perspective when going to look at evaluating solutions. Thinking through the lens of how does this impact a human being on the other side of this decision?
Yeah. So benefits to me is no longer just about 401k, just about time off, just about how I can accrue that time off or what the company matches. We've got to go beyond that. It's got to be a personalized experience at work. The benefit to me is the personalized experience at work, knowing that I have a path, knowing that I use this analogy a lot on stage where how many of our companies hire for someone who for job 2 or 3, right? You apply for job 1, but we forget that, hey, we have career paths. We have other areas of interest for you within this organization, because the benefits are the benefits, right? You can survey your people and say, okay, we're going to do, this fringe benefit or this EAP, or, here's how much you're going to pay in your premiums. But it can't just be who we decide to go with from a vendor perspective, right? But you think about going beyond that and you say, okay, hey, you know what, Spencer, you hired for job, you've applied for job A. We're going to give you job A. But I want you to think about 3 years from now. We have job B, C. Hey, you want to learn about something in a different department or organization? By the way, we have this program internally that you can go learn other areas of the business while still doing your job. So then it starts to get your mind thinking, okay, well, they're looking at me as a value. They're looking at me as a real asset here, and we're giving you options in job 2, 3, 10, 20. My goal as an organization is to keep the best employee. And the way that I do that is give them a personalized experience. It's not, you know what I mean? That's where it gets really, really cool. But going back to the question, from the benefits lens, obviously we know companies have to control cost. We know that prices are rising and everything. Be fiscally responsible, but also communicate with your employees. Hey, look, your premiums went up because the economy's tough right now, or premiums went up because we didn't do as well as we could have, or whatever, whatever it is, the information that you can share. And I'm not saying, go out and share everything. I'm just saying there are things that we've held so true and close to the chest because we're afraid that other people are going to find out. Well, I can pick up my phone and Google what other companies are doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like that's so that to me, companies are really missing the mark on going beyond just the standard benefits package. The benefit is me keeping the good employee.
Yeah, talk to me. I mean, I'd love to hear your perspective because I'm sure you get to see a lot of these, like kind of those next wave of fringe benefits. Anything out there cool, like a point solution or something like a quality of lifestyle benefit that you hear companies offering or you're looking at? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. So obviously, so one of the ones that we have, we if you do the fitness challenges, right, or healthy challenges, we get free money, right? So it goes to gift cards. You know what I mean? So we really focus in on, hey, we want you, if our purpose is people, we want you to have a long and healthy and sustainable life. Here's the way we're going to incentivize you to do it. Now, it's completely up to you whether you want to do that or not. But I really, really like that because one, it gives me an opportunity to do something that I love and then just give it away. You know what I mean? Like Christmas gifts come from that. You know, it's really, really cool. That's one. I'm noticing a lot of companies shifting and providing more mental health and mental health awareness stuff. I'm noticing companies do a lot of, is there a way that you can do, hybrid work, and how does that impact the long term? But that's a whole nother conversation. I'm trying to think, man.
There's one that I'm curious if you've seen this. One that I got introduced to recently, not necessarily a particular company, but an idea of something called like financial wellness. Where are you seeing that? Where like it's not necessarily tied to, hey, go talk to an advisor and they make money on you. It's like, no, you have access to coaching, understanding, even just basic personal finance.
No, it's funny you mentioned that. I gave a talk with a colleague of mine, Erica, about holistic well-being, right? And holistic well-being is finances included. So we talk about it. I'm like, man, the companies really miss the mark on even teaching people how to budget. Right? Like teaching people how to look at their W-2s or how to look at their statements, right? So many of us, so many employees too, they don't know how to file taxes and yet they're required to do it. So it's like some companies typically push it off and say, well, go to the AP or go to, XYZ tax brokerage firm and they'll help you file them. And I'm like, man, like how great would it be if I could just sit down with somebody to understand what my paycheck says and what my W-2 says before I go do it. That's actually a really, really big one. I would like to take it a step further and let's teach people how to budget, right? And say, okay, I get it. None of that can really happen unless we have a culture of trust and a good foundation of that. But man, those individuals could thrive by saving, 5, 10, 20, 5,000, whatever the amount is a month to go and do the things that they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's what I think, that you hear all the time, like the average American doesn't have more than $500 or $1,000 in savings or couldn't handle a bill, a medical bill that's above that amount, right? So you think about the stress that's related to all of a sudden I've get this bill for $4,000 and I can't pay it, and now what do I do? And is it going to go to collection? You know, and so then you bring all that back to work and go, well, I'm trying to function in my job, but in the back of my brain all day is like I'm so stressed about money I can't even perform well.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned that. I just had a similar conversation the other week, and exactly what you were saying. I really get frustrated with companies that think that just because you walk through the doors of your workplace that you're supposed to leave all of the personal behind. Right. And that's not real. We're human. Like that's not realistic. So how about we provide them things inside the workplace that are going to help take those things away, mental health being one of them, right? We have an accelerator lab team, Cecily leads it, a dear friend of mine, that they just launched the Brain Matters campaign within our company that gives all of our employees access to mental health advocacy, research, doctors, different things that they can go and say, hey, it's a community. Man, I struggle with anxiety, or man, I struggle with depression. It's almost like a mini employee resource group, right? Where people can go and just share and be personal, but also get direction, right? And companies don't have to pay for it, or employees don't have to pay for it. It's just a place that they can go. Like, I mean, that's amazing. Like knowing that someone is like me and going through this, but also working at a fast pace, and we're trying to be successful and we're trying to grow. You had mentioned the paycheck thing. There's a stat out there that I think it's a little bit over a third or a fourth where people live paycheck to paycheck. And it's like, man, can we help educate to understand why, and then maybe make a difference in that person's life?
Yeah.
You know, there's just so many opportunities that we miss on within companies, and this is where you and I get to challenge them.
That's for sure, man. And that's what you talked about, the human element. I mean, we obviously talk about our businesses and things like that, but just like talking to a human being and really understanding that they're bringing in their entire existence in totality to a conversation.
Sure.
Like how you sitting here today, you have your past experience of your entire life leading you, the personal, professional, career, all that stuff. And I think, yeah, like for whatever reason, there's this expectation that's probably outdated today, but it's like that employee walks in the door, they're my employee.
Yeah.
They're all they care about.
Do your job.
Do your job.
Yeah.
And then you go home and you worry about your stuff.
Right.
Well, how do I forget about the thought in my head of me worrying about my children or worrying about my money?
Yeah.
Right. Like those things are intertwined.
Yeah.
So what, somebody that's maybe looking to get into this field, and we got a couple minutes left and we'll wrap up to get on to lunch and all those things. But what do you think about somebody that wants to break into human resources or break into human capital management? Like, where do I start if I have any interest in that at all?
That's a really good question. With the way that hiring's going right now, I think you could jump in, head first.
Completely green, right? Yeah.
I really do. With the great resignation, the great reshuffle, employee labor participation shortage, all of the things, like the picking is good right now.
Okay.
So I would say just do it. But before you do that, do your research, right? I mean, look at the company, look at the job, look at what the job's doing. I don't think that there's just one path right now versus like when you and I graduated, it was get a job, go from job 1, 2 to 3, and you get your experience and then you get promoted. I mean, that still kind of exists, but if you want to do it, there's so many self-learning things out there, self-paced learning things, and companies are slowly moving away from college degree requirements, and they'll give you their internal certifications. The market's changing. So I would say do your research on the company, do your research on the job, and then if you don't know, ask. Typically, companies will put the recruiter's name out there, shoot them an email. Hey, what's this job about, right? So that would be my advice.
Really? So I guess maybe the advice is, don't necessarily presume you're not qualified for a job that you might be interested in.
That's right.
And I think that's, every job that I've had and I've grown throughout my career is I still learned the actual skill set I needed on the actual job, right? Like you bring your soft skills, you bring whatever you have to the table as a human being, but the actual execution of the job requires the experience on the job and learning on the job.
And most companies are going to teach you that, right? You know what I mean?
And like you said, most companies that invest in you over a 3 or 6 month period want to retain you, right? So they're going to put the money in to train you to get you to be proficient in that job. So they want you to stick around. They want you to excel. Like you come in the door, they want you to be successful at this job. Like having that mindset, I think, is important as well. You mentioned artificial intelligence a couple times, so just maybe the future of human capital management, the infusion of that artificial intelligence into language and recognition patterns.
Sure.
But like, what is the evolution you think for you in the next couple of years in your job and your role? Yeah.
So growth, right? I mean, just like you, I think we continue to try and make an impact in a way that is positive for people, right? The automation piece from a company's perspective, I spent some time up at Cambridge with some colleagues, and we spent some time with our friends up there and working with a program up in Cambridge. And automation, AI, all of that, what we have to recognize is change is not going to slow down from that perspective.
Okay.
Like we are only going to automate and have AI even more and more rapidly, right? Like it's going to develop at such a rapid pace. Elon Musk even says AI is more terrifying than nuclear.
I've heard him say that.
I don't think that's the case in HCM tech, right? I don't think that's the case in HCM tech, because it's just going to help businesses grow and grow and grow and meet people where they're at. But for my job specifically, I think it's going to be really cool to see how we can reach larger audiences at a faster pace, right? Where we can, provide better content or provide better practices at a faster pace, right? Like all of the podcasters or influencers out there are all trying to figure out the latest algorithms. But for me, internally as a consultant and as a public speaker, I think it will present some challenge for companies on how to navigate the change and the shift in the markets and And, again, the same words, productivity, efficiency, effectiveness, all of those things that we're going to get answers even faster.
And so you mentioned the dynamics of like a hybrid culture and whether that's a long-term, or do you shift back to offices over time, or are we stuck, not stuck, but is virtual environments here to stay? I mean, are some jobs really, we've discovered they can be done at least as well, if not maybe better virtually permanently? I mean, that's probably a big question for you guys going on right now too, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. We have the approach of, again, meeting the employee where they're at. It was so funny. I was talking to somebody the other day in leadership, and they're like, man, for someone who's been with their pet for 2 years, and then say, hey, we're going to make you come back to the office and then force you to put your dog in daycare or hire whatever it is. And they said, man, I feel for that individual. Like, how is that the right thing to do? And that's where hybrid work, I do believe, is going to be here to stay forever. Yeah. And some companies may stay remote forever. And COVID was the catalyst, but we don't know what's coming in the future from a disease perspective. I've worked with a lot of companies putting in these plans on how to operate it. And what happens is, if we don't meet the employee where they're at, what do? They leave. That's right.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what we're going to do with all this new commercial real estate here in Texas, man. My goodness, the number of buildings going on. Right? Like, whoa, how are we going to fill those things? But all right, so Chaz, I really appreciate your time. We've probably been going almost an hour, man. But closing thoughts, give me a couple of things that you really want to emphasize for the folks that have stuck around here.
Yeah. Closing thoughts, I would say absolutely continue to challenge yourself in your career and your professional development. If you aren't doing something that serves others, you'll find greater fulfillment in that than you will ever find in your career. Career is just a small component of our lives. And I would say absolutely go listen to your podcast and our podcast, the People Purpose Podcast, and take a look at UKG if you're in this space and you're out looking, because that's, our job here. Of course, I work for a sales organization, and that's okay. You work for a sales organization, that's okay. But find people that care about their people and then go buy their product, because we know that if they care about their people, they're going to care about the customers even more.
Awesome. So, brilliantly said, man. I really appreciate you, man. So thanks for coming on again, and I look forward to hanging out with you again soon.
You too, man. Thanks.
All right, Chaz.
Bye.
True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. Check them out at truecaptive.com.